There is no objection. The House now comes to questions for oral answer, and the first question stands in the name of Grant Robertson.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Does he stand by all his statements regarding water ownership, rights and interests?
The Honourable Bill English on behalf of the Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, on behalf of the Prime Minister, yes.
The Grant Robertson.
Can he confirm the joint announcement he made last night with the Māori Party leadership that no matter what the outcome of the tribunal and subsequent court action, he will not legislate, even if that outcome was that Māori had a proprietary type right over water?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister stands by the statements made and the statement that was released.
Grant Robertson.
Supplementary. Can he confirm that his agreement to not legislate against Māori rights and interests in water has in fact already been broken by the mixed ownership model bill that has passed through Parliament and allows for the partial sale of entities like Mighty River Power that have rights and interests in water that affect all New Zealanders, including Māori?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, no, the mixed ownership model bill does not do that. In fact, it includes the preservation of Section 9 and its references to the Treaty of Waitangi. What the Prime Minister is doing is quite different from what the previous Labor government did, and that is we are building confidence around discussions with Maori about their rights and interests rather than overreact.
Order. That was beyond the question asked. Grant Robertson.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker. Can he confirm that it is his government's intention that no matter what the outcome of the Waitangi Tribunal and subsequent court action, whatever rights it may decide Māori have in terms of water, that his government will not legislate in that regard?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister stands by the statement in the statement that was released last night. It is the government's expectation that, well, put it this way, the member is probably not correctly connecting the Waitangi Tribunal, any outcome from the Waitangi Tribunal with any outcome from the court action, because the court action is much more likely to be focused on preventing the sale of assets going ahead rather than any particular aspect of Maori rights and interests.
Grant Robertson.
Does he agree with Tariana Turia that it was a misconception that this claim is about the ownership of water? And if so, why did he continue to make statements about his opposition to the ownership of water, if not to just raise tension around the issue?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the issue of ownership was actually raised by the claimants. In fact, we've seen claimants, I think, discussing that publicly recently. The Prime Minister stands by his restatement of the long-standing view of New Zealand's governments and jurisprudence that no one owns the water.
The Honourable Trevor Mallard.
In light of the indemnity granted to treaty matters or to private shareholders of the to-be privatised SOEs under the mixed ownership model legislation passed recently, and does that mean that all risk from court action now lies with the Crown, and if so, why did his Minister of Finance not record that unspecified fiscal risk as part of the budget documentation currently being considered by the House?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, it's always been the case that the risks or costs associated with treaty settlements are matters between the Crown and iwi. But again, I think this member, like the other, is getting ahead of himself over whether or not the courts are likely to be settling the issue of Maori rights and interests. There's a prospect of court action. The prospect of that court action is much more likely to be related to injuncting the sale process. It's unlikely that the courts themselves would set out to determine Maori rights and interests. If they did, that could take quite a long time.
Grant Robertson.
Is it correct that the reason he raised the spectre of ownership of water by Māori was to divert public attention from his hugely unpopular asset sales program and to inflame divisions about treaty issues? And when will he apologise for this divisive behaviour?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I think the member is overstating his case there. The fact is claimants have gone to the tribunal And they've made a range of claims, some of them have expressed those claims as ownership of the water. The Prime Minister just clearly restated, in the light of that action in the tribunal, what the long-standing position of New Zealand governments has been and will remain so. And there's, obviously pretty broad public interest in whether the Waitangi Tribunal is or isn't going to be contesting the ownership of water.
Question number 2, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Finance and asks